From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Andrew Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know, featuring Triforce's cat, Astrid. We love mysteries. We hope you dig mysteries as well. Tonight's episode takes us across the Pacific to Southeastern Asia, specifically to a place most people do not visit, Laos.
It's a bit of a history mystery, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Scooby and the gang would be on board.
Oh, and it's an exciting one because there's so much stuff to ponder within this topic, and there's a lot of history for us to discuss as well, just as Ben is alluding to, just with the history of the country and especially with the United States involvement.
Mm-hmm.
History mystery.
Yes, just so. The recent history of Laos is intensely troubled, and we'll get into that as well. Most Americans in the crowd tonight, if you think of Laos, you're probably thinking of it through the lens of the Vietnam War. And you're probably thinking of Laos and the Vietnam War because, as Matt mentioned, during the Vietnam War and during the Cold War, the United States planted thousands of fatal landmines that remain a danger to anybody in the area in the modern day.
So they didn't just go back and remove them all as a courtesy? No?
No.
Oh, man, that's bad form. Bad form, U.S.
True story, a couple of boffins figured out how to train rats to hunt the landmines.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also the ordnance that just fell from the sky, right? When planes were flying over Laos.
Of course, sorry.
I mean, but we're talking about, and it's hard to understand the amount of unexploded ordnance that is just existing there.
Millions of tons. Not all of it purposely dropped there. A lot of sort of loose change out of the pocket scenarios. But the problem with that is for someone walking around, it doesn't matter whether or not the bomb was put there on purpose. It will still explode.
Yes, because most of it is that term unexploded ordnance, right? Where it's just there waiting.
Mm-hmm. And despite this lens, we do have to acknowledge there's a lot more to this country, to what is called Laos today. It's ancient hidden history. And tonight, folks, we are hoping you will join us on an ongoing endeavor. Maybe you can help us figure out a question that has baffled investigators for centuries, if not millennia. Why are there so many giant stone jars?
It's a good question. One we will likely answer after a quick word from our sponsor. That was our cold open.
Here are the facts. All right, what do we know about Laos? If you're being fancy or you work at the UN, the technical name for the country is the Lao People's Democratic Republic, or Lao PDR. And it's a fascinating place. It's in Southeast Asia. It is the only country in Southeast Asia that does not have a coastline.
Yeah. Wow, I never thought about it like that. I always imagined a piece of it. I guess that is Vietnam, where it wraps around the western side of it.
Yeah, borders shared with Cambodia, China, Myanmar/Burma, Thailand, and Vietnam. It's fascinating and tragic that a lot of the history of this region is unfamiliar to the Western world. To be completely honest, I had no idea. I don't think any of us had any idea how far back human habitation stretches in this specific region.
Right. We know, for example, that the oldest skull in all of Southeast Asia was discovered in northern Laos. The Tam Phya Ling Cave holds human remains that date back at least 46,000 years.
Yeah. Pretty nuts. Pretty impressive. Also, it's the perfect passing ground between multiple civilizations. It kind of reminded us of the role that Eurasia played with the old Silk Road, right? You're between these great empires. You become a transit point, and Laos was in, or what we call Laos today, was in that situation. Civilizations from India and China, other nearby regions, they all passed through at one point or another in very ancient history, even before these civilizations would be called China or India. They made contact and they contributed, at times violently, to the modern day Laos.
Oh, yeah, man. And there are all kinds of just incredible artifacts that you can find. There are, well, you guys tell me. In my research online, I found that it's pretty difficult to get some of the websites for the museums, like the more local museums that exist in places in Laos. Well, it's hard to get those websites working really well for me, and to see the actual imagery and the actual artifacts that are in museums and places there. But you can find a couple, and some of the, especially around the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. But there are things that go back to this era that goes back millions of years up into 11,000 years ago, which we just mentioned. The oldest skull was like 46,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, and it's such a diverse region too, because I think a lot of people, myself included, might not have realized that it's like its own kind of crossroads of civilization, especially being such a tiny geographical, area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the whole point is we've talked about this before. The stuff that sticks around that humans create, what's the thing that sticks around the best? Stone.
Bones and stones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking about the Pleistocene, aka street name, Ice Ages.
Yeah. The Mammoth Times.
Mm-hmm. They were mammoth times, indeed. And people will argue there were giants in those days.
Which is really cool when you think about at least the stories surrounding today's topic.
Mm-hmm. And the roots of modern day Laos come about in, I would say, 1353 CE or so. A warlord named Fa Gum declared himself the king of Lanxiang, million elephants. That loosely translates to. Also, side note, we are clearly not native speakers. We are going to tangle with some words that we'll do our best to pronounce, and if we're ever in a tough spot, we'll spell it out for you so you can search on your own.
For sure. Ben, you helpfully pointed out off air that I believe the X sound is sort of a Shia kind of
Xiang, yeah, kind of song, yeah.
So it's good to know.
It depends on the
we'll do our level best.
Yeah, right. It depends on your translations. Your linguistic mileage may vary. The kingdom was initially a vassal state of a civilization in nearby Cambodia. It split into three different parts in 1694. It was overtaken by the Thai or Siamese civilization, gradually, piece by piece, such that it became a vassal state of the Siamese civilization in 1885, which is crazy because
that's recent.
Right.
More or less, right?
Right,
well,
yeah.
It gets even crazier in Laos, where they keep getting invaded. I think it's one of the major problems of existing in that cool spot where you get influenced by all these, big empires, but those big empires often have plans, ideas about expanding territory, and you just happen to be right up against them.
Right.
It's that crossroads element.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe another way to say it is you can meet a lot of people at an interstate gas station, but also you can meet a lot of people at an interstate gas station.
Sushi glory hole. Sorry, have you guys heard that song yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Heard or experienced? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not what you're thinking, guys.
Wait, where are you going? Hear us out.
Yeah, hear us out. So if you look at modern Lao, like to your earlier point there, Noel, you'll see it is a fairly new thing. As we record this evening, experts are still working to learn more about the story of this region. It is often described as being forgotten. It is one of the least explored countries in this part of the world, if not on the planet overall.
And that's not in any, well, I mean, we're going to get to it, but in any small part because of some of the stuff we're talking about today, like all of these things left behind by the U.S. that are not particularly conducive to exploration, lest you get blown up.
Oh, yeah. That unexploded ordnance has had a major effect on so many aspects of the country, whether it's from economic expansion to being able to dig in the ground for, at these amazing sites, because you got to get them cleared first.
Probably a little bit of an issue with tourism,
Which is the fastest growing legal industry in the country.
Of course.
Couple caveats there for the astute listener, and then check out our future episode on the troubled border of Myanmar. But with this, we know that the modern Laos is a somewhat recent thing. The actual name, the term for these three different kingdoms, was coined by French colonial forces. They united Lao kingdoms in the region under the rule of French Indochina back in 1893. So again, pretty recent in the grand scheme of things, primarily due to the consistent interference of foreign powers. Laos is a country with a lot of problems. We actually, we talk about this sometimes on air, but we actually may not be able to go to Laos after this episode. They're a little bit touchy. The the ruling communist government is constantly accused of corruption. Poverty is rife. Crime is as widespread as the bombs, which are relics of, what is sometimes called the secret war, which took place around Vietnam.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The 1963, 64 to 73. Those are the years when those bombs were dropped. And it was the secret war. This is mentioned and almost hinted at in a lot of the popular, I would say, graphic novels and some of the movies and TV shows that we like a lot. But just this concept of what the United States was saying. Like you can hear quotes of then President Kennedy saying, we're in Laos for peaceful reasons. It's all peace, baby. He said it just like that.
Humanitarian.
Yeah. And then just for the result to be, mines and cluster bombs.
Yeah, the result is that Laos today, this evening, is in fact the most bombed country in modern history per capita. If you are fortunate enough to visit, just remember this. First off, never talk politics in a foreign country, not to be like the fun police, but be very careful here. And then secondly, if you see a sign that says, don't walk on the grass, you should fucking believe it.
You're gonna want to tread lightly.
Well, that's so.
Or maybe not tread at all. Probably best to not tread at all.
If you want to learn more about that stuff, we'll throw to an article real quick. In The Guardian, you can read something that was written in April of 2023 titled "The 50-Year Fight to Clear U.S. Bombs from Laos," and it is just tragic to hear the stories of children, little kids in school being taught specifics about types of ordnance so that they can recognize even the tip of a piece of something that's, stuck out of the dirt.
These evil relics of American activity during the Vietnam War, when the U.S. was bombing Laos, when there were incursions in Cambodia as well. In Laos alone, hundreds of people die or get maimed every year. We're talking children missing limbs. We're talking people walking through a place that they have walked through for decades, making the wrong step and becoming obliterated. If you want to read a slightly more positive spin on this, do check out a Smithsonian article by Danny Lewis from 2015, which is all about how giant rats have been taught to sniff out these landmines. That's at least a positive spin. I'm always looking for those.
Do they go in? Is that like their final mission when they find a cluster bomb, or do they just alert? Sorry, I'm just imagining them being like jumping on it.
Yeah, they're not They're not they're not suicide jockeys. They are they're also pretty expensive to train.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Especially if given the lifespan of a rat.
Yeah.
Story for a different time, right?
But there are cool groups out there like the Mines Advisory Group that are specifically attempting to clear large areas, right? But I think in that article from The Guardian, they're saying at the current pace, it would take 100 years to clear it.
Yes, that's absolutely correct, unfortunately. And the endeavor to clear the country of unexploded ordnance is dramatically underfunded because it simply does not exist in the zeitgeist for a lot of people who would donate to a charitable cause. Kind of similar to how only the fuzzy animals that are endangered get saved. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's true. The cute ones. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about those pangolins, man? Come on.
Gross. Get rid of them.
I could see it.
I'm just joking.
So if you are, I like that note. I could see it, a world without pangolins.
No.
We're on the way. I want to save them too. If you are, again, fortunate enough to explore Laos firsthand, you're going to meet some of the coolest people around. Some of the nicest people. You'll have some of the most kick-ass food ever. You are also going to encounter ancient mysteries that have baffled people for millennia. One of the most famous, the Plain of Jars. I can't believe we're finally getting to this. This has been a hobby horse. I've never seen them.
Well, me neither. Outside of the internet, of course, but I'm sure it doesn't do justice because guys, I'm sorry. I'm going to make an Elden Ring reference. I just have to say
by
it.
all means. Is it the jars with arms and legs that run around?
Well, specifically,
Smash you?
it's imagery from the expansion that exists where there are just fields that have the jars that exist in that game. It feels like somebody was aware of this topic, the Plain of Jars, and put it into the game and came up with lore about it. And it just, when I'm looking at imagery of the actual Plain of Jars that exists in the world today, I go right to that imagery in Elden Ring because that's where I saw that very specific thing first, just fields of these amazing looking jars.
And that expansion is Shadow of the Erd Tree.
Yeah, so I always think the Skidoo tree, which is a weird name for
the Ohio tree. Yeah. We're not kidding, friends and neighbors. If you go out to the Xiangguang Plateau of northern Laos, you will see a relatively level area just inundated with these huge ancient carved stone jars. Just like look at these things. Pull up your search browser of choice, visit your local library. Sure, the French discovered it during their colonial period, but everybody already knew these things were out there. And the questions we're hoping to answer are: 1, who built these? 2, why were they built? And 3, why are they no longer being built today?
Do you guys remember the pretty popular Christian band Jars of Clay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why it comes to mind. Sorry, didn't mean to derail. What was it? They had a song about like the Noah flood. 'Cause if I can't sleep after 40 days. They were kind of like Christian Creed. Wait, Creed was Christian Creed. What am I talking about?
We'll find out after a word from our sponsors. Here's where it gets crazy. All right, first off,
Jars of Clay was my favorite band growing up. Okay,
Jars of Clay was great. I was going to say that. I thought that was a bop. It was one of those things.
It's called Flood, wasn't it? I think it was just called Flood.
Yeah, it's one of those. The song about the flood is one of those bops where you don't need to speak English to understand it. The song structure is just amazing.
It tells the tale, it spins the yarn.
Mm-hmm. And we hope you can help us spin some yarn today. There's not one Plain of Jars. There are like 90 known instances of these things out there on the plateau, and there may well be more because this is one of the least explored countries in the area. Each site has between 1 to 400 carved huge jars, cauldrons. Actually, if you look at the pictures, they look a lot more like cauldrons.
Yeah, it does. It looks like something could have either been cooked in there or you think storage as well as soon as you look at them, which is really interesting. And I guess the other thing that is kind of baffling when you look at them, they are varying in their sizes, right? Some of these, none of them are tiny, right? Because they're almost 4 feet. The smallest one is about 4 feet or 3.
About a meter. So, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's not tiny. That's still a huge jar. What are you going to put in that jar? But others go up to like 9, almost 10 feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're between 1 to 3 meters. That's about 3.28 to 9.8 feet. Shout out to Namibia and the U.S., the last 2 countries who refuse to do the metric system. Yeah,
because this is America.
You will pry feet and inches from our cold dead feet and hands.
Nobody wants to hunt big meter. You know what I mean? We hunt big foot.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, I feel like we just all need to take a plug of Big League Chew. Do you guys remember that? When
absolutely, it felt so cool with my bubblegum chaw.
Yeah. The candy cigarettes. Oh man,
bad idea.
But these jars, amazing. Yeah. And because they're of varying sizes, I think you immediately go, well, why would there be such a difference between the large ones and the small ones? Were they all for the same thing?
Right. Yeah. Why the variation upon the theme? The bottom is always larger than the top. They are all cylindrical. They all basically do look like cauldrons. Some are not in great shape. Obviously, some of them have lids. Most have like a carved rim. You could imagine a lid being. And it reminds me of our discussion on the mystery of Nan Madol. These are megalithic structures. At some point in ancient history, a bunch of people who had a lot of other stuff to do put a ton of time and energy into building these curious structures.
Matt, you're spot on. I picture the jars from Elden Ring instantly in my head. Like that, it just that they're the perfect size, perfect level of ornate kind of attention to detail carved into the outside. These probably didn't sprout arms and legs and kick your ass, but in my mind, they look very similar.
There's definitely some inspiration from these sites. And they're, Ben, as you were saying, they're scattered like pretty much all over this area. There are 3 main sites, though, right? If you go on a map or something, you'll discover Site 1, Site 2, Site 3, which are just larger collections of them. But one of the other things that was discovered is that these jars exist under the ground, too, in a lot of places. So it's not just the ones you can see above ground, which look incredible. There's also a bunch of stuff buried.
Yes. Yeah. Buried, forgotten, unexplored. We've kicked some stats already on the jars themselves and their structures, but what we need to understand is this is one of the most important prehistoric sites in all of human history. And to this evening, no one really knows what those human ancestors were doing when they built this stuff. We've got some good guesses, but no one has proven it. We don't know what inspired people to make these things. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until 2021 that a coalition of researchers from Laos and Australia managed to date some of the jars, not romantically. Like they figured out how old the jars are, and they did this with a bizarre technology that does not sound like it should be real. It sounds like a move in a video game. Optically stimulated luminescence.
Gotta tell you, looked this up, guys, and I'm still super confused. What we could say is, from a super layman, that's me, standpoint, it is testing when the last time specific like minerals were exposed to sunlight. And it does it in a way that is super sciencey, and my brain hurts when I read some of the sentences, so I don't even know if I'm going to try. I'll read it to you from Geosciences. Optically stimulated luminescence dating or optical dating provides a measure of time since sediment grains, so specific grains we're talking about here, were deposited and shielded from further light or heat exposure.
Mm-hmm. This makes use of electrons that are trapped between different crystalline structures of certain minerals.
Sure. I just don't get it.
I kind of get it. Grains, Matt. It's just about the grains.
You don't mess with the grains?
I have so many grains.
Yes, I absolutely mess with the grains.
I think it's just hard for me to understand how. I love that humans are so smart. Just figuring out how you actually measure that, right? Like, these electrons. There's pockets where these electrons, where stuff would be filled inside if it were exposed, but it's not. It was under this jar for this number of years, roughly.
That's one of those things where, first off, yes, thank you to the humans, and then secondly, someone obviously lost their mind figuring this out. You know what I mean?
I've got it.
Eureka! I've gone mad.
Yeah, someone's marriage got ruined over a valence band obsession.
Dude.
That's what happened. Well, so thank you. Thank you, Boffins, for doing this. This research is fascinating. You can read the statements from the folks who leveraged this to solve the mystery. That's people like Dr. Louise Shawan from University of Melbourne. That's Associate Professor Dougald O'Reilly from ANU, Australia National University, and Dr. Thonglith Longkoth from the Laos Department of Heritage. So they figured out how to do this. What they found when they applied this optically stimulated luminescence was that people had been building these jars across multiple generations, and they were likely placed in their current positions from 1240 to 660 BCE. These things predate Jesus Christ.
By a long shot. And it is just, gosh, it's baffling that we can even know that through that stuff. But what's the other dating technique that was written about in that same article? There's one in Phys.org about that. It was.
And is there a reason that radiocarbon dating can't be used, or is like this? I've never heard of this method. I guess I've always.
Is that what zircon UPB dating is? They mentioned that as well as like a way to measure carbon.
They definitely used radiocarbon dating as well. I think what's new about this and the other. Look, I can't pretend to understand a lot of it. You know what I mean?
You could. You could.
I think it'd be a disservice to all of us. Zircon UPB dating is definitely a thing. It's also detrital. What do those words mean?
That's what it says.
Right. Yeah.
Involving detritus.
So guys, I looked that one up too. This is what it says. Whole grain analysis by thermal ionization mass spectrometer yields UPB ages with the greatest precision, but potentially poorest accuracy. What?
Like I didn't understand even where that sentence is supposed to be split up.
Also, greatest precision, poorest accuracy means it will give you the most specific result with the highest likelihood that result is incorrect.
Exactly.
What?
But also, it's because of the mixing of different age components in PB loss domains.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about that.
Of course, PB loss domains. Yeah. Why didn't you say so? That's a horse of a different color.
Yeah. Where is Jaw?
We need you.
Jaw rule.
Jaw will sort this out.
He'll get it done. So I think the material science there, one of the fascinating points we raise is that these jars are not uniform in their composition. You'll find limestone, sometimes sandstone, granite, a combination thereof. Most are sandstone, but the fascinating, scary ones, the ones at Site 1, those are limestone. And what it seems to indicate is a valuable clue. The sculptors were likely working with whatever material they could find nearby. You can trace some of these stones to nearby quarries.
But they're not that nearby, right? Which is a whole other thing.
Yeah, they're longer than you would imagine, similar to Nan Madol. But what I think it shows us is that people were working in service of an idea, a greater concept or cultural trend. So if you want to make these cauldrons or these jars for some reason, and you don't have sandstone nearby, then you grab the granite or the limestone.
You don't have the sandstones.
Do you know how many?
That sounds good. I think we keep it. Yeah.
Do you know how many were made out of quartz, guys?
No.
0, at least, according to
Big old
plain. Yeah, according to plain-of-jars.org.
Yes. Yeah. Also, the crystal skulls are a hoax, unfortunately.
Oh,
But the vodka is a thing that exists.
The vodka?
Crystal Skull vodka. It comes in a crystal skull, and it's like
Yeah.
Danny
Okay.
DeVito's
Of
company, or
course.
it's somebody famous's company.
somebody.
No, it's Dan Aykroyd. Sorry, it's Dan Aykroyd's company,
Classic
who is a
Dan.
big old ghosty guy. He's really
Yeah.
into conspiracy stuff.
He's got a show, too, or he had
He
one.
did. He did.
Pretty good.
He's an odd cat.
Yes. Also Canadian. You like how I added that in italics at the end?
Not mutually exclusive necessarily, being Canadian and being an odd cat, but there's a Venn diagram in there somewhere.
I think I could listen to him talk like maybe all day. Just something about
pretty
his accent is just so.
The
I don't
Muffler
know.
King of Ontario.
I just love it.
What was that character he played in Tommy Boy? He was like the Muffler King of.
Yeah,
I
man.
forgot he was in Tommy
Yeah,
Boy.
he was.
Anyway, congratulations, Dan,
Yes.
is what we're saying.
On all your success.
On all your success, big fans. We also have to mention that in these structures, you can find human remains. And that's our other
Bury the
big
lead,
clue.
why don't you?
That's yeah, they probably buried a few, but that's our other big clue, right? So let's go to something we teased earlier. Our immediate questions: who built this? Why? If we want to ask who built it, we have to look at the folklore, right? Ask the people on the ground.
Yeah.
Lao legend has it that a race of giants, you love a good giant story, Ben, potentially inhabited the area and were ruled by a king by the name of Kun Chung, who fought a very long and ultimately victorious battle against an enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. And why did he need all those jars? He's a big old giant. Why are they just all over the place?
What do you do after you have won a battle against a enemy? Well, in Chung's case, you make a lot of rice wine.
That's how you replenish your chi in the RPG version of this story, right?
Yeah,
there you
your
go.
flask
Yeah.
or whatever. You gotta re-up that those HPs.
Get that Lao high. Yeah.
Maybe it's strategically placed supplies during the battles and stuff. Like you just
caches.
reach out and grab.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is made up in my mind. Sorry.
This is headcanon for us. So maybe maybe further, the reason that all these jars are broken open and strewn around is because they kept drinking the rice wine and forgot to replace it at some point, right? So maybe like after a rager house party, you walk into the back deck and there are just tons of empty Miller Lite cans or something.
Or
Yeah, dude.
you go into the fridge and someone's left an empty carton of oat milk in there and you just fly into a rage. You know who it was. It was the kid. The kid did it.
Okay.
Oh no.
I feel like you're coming from some firsthand experience on that one. Nope. Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'm venting a little bit. It's true.
So
Nobody likes to see that. Nobody wants to see an empty, yogurt
bait and
cardboard
switch.
thing. No, it's no good.
well, you guys know I drink a lot of strange beverages and juices. And the thing, I know what you're talking about because let's say you get a jar of lemonade, right?
Yeah.
And there's the one swig left in the
me a
bottom.
break. Nobody wants
why
that.
Why
Just
did you
toss
do
it.
that? Come on.
Dude. Well, let's talk about other possible uses of these jars because can I tell you where my mind went to?
Please do.
And I saw it mentioned in a couple of places. What about ancient techniques for food storage and
For fermentation.
Yeah.
exactly
Right.
Because I I don't know why, and I know this is not correct, but I imagine the way to create kimchi, if you're doing it in some of the older ways and literally burying it for fermentation purposes, I'm imagining using some kind of vessel like that, not for that specific food, but for something like that.
I mean, there's all kinds of other like East Asian cultures that will wrap things in, say, like banana leaves and bury them in the ground. Like, there's all kinds of examples of what you're talking about, Matt.
Yeah. Also, fermentation is something that humans would be figuring out around this time. And fermentation was a global technology because everybody had to figure out how to keep food edible, right?
Yeah. And stuff to drink, right?
Right, which would go to the second idea or the third idea here, which would be storage of rainwater, for instance, or storage of something. And that all jives.
I propose an additional possibility for these jars. How about clay?
Yes. Wait, are you saying
These
jars
may well have been jars of clay.
Of clay?
Yes.
No, that answer is worlds apart, my friend.
Okay.
That was my favorite song they wrote.
Wow.
Sorry.
Oh, geez, I never made it past Flood. That one kind of broke through secular radio. Flood. I don't think I ever got around to the rest of their catalog.
Yeah, they have an album coming out with Dan Aykroyd and Ja Rule.
I can't wait. What a power trio.
It's called Jaws of Clay.
That's too good, Ben.
It's terrible.
I threw up a little bit. It was so good.
I threw up joy in my mouth and my heart.
I couldn't handle it.
If only we had our own set of gigantic stone jars.
It's not too late, man. Let's go in on them. Let's go in on them together.
That's the spirit. And we have to remember that folklore always carries with it some version of the truth. We saw this in earlier giant stories like the stdwytk. Check out our episode on that. Spoiler, we figured out what was going on. Maybe here we take a break for a word from our sponsors, and then when we return, we ask, why build this? Like, why though? Why? We seriously still don't really know why people were building this, giant or human. And you're right, Noel, I love a giant story. But we do know there was a little bit of research up until like the early 1900s.
Yeah, right. And that's mostly by French academics, primarily one in particular, a geologist named Madeleine Colony, who excavated a cave at one of the first French discovered sites, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's about claiming things, named, as you put it, Ben, in a burst of creativity, Site Number 1, like the Blur song. It's like a song number 1. The Woohoo one. And Kalani explored another 6 or so sites that contained these jars. And for decades, her work was kind of seen as the best Western, not like the motel chain, exploration of the sites and motivations behind building these structures. She kind of seemed to be the authority for some time on what was going on with these structures.
And just to be clear here, Kalani, in her exploration of Site 1 in particular, she discovered the human bones, the teeth, the remains that humans were at one point in at least some of these jars.
As well as pottery shards.
Yeah, pottery. So in my head, these are almost pottery themselves, but they're not. They are stone, they're carved stone structures. If we know that at least some of these jars contained human remains, don't we feel like that skews even the way people would think about them potentially? Because you don't accidentally have human remains in fermenting jars or in rainwater. Okay, no, you're right. So okay. I feel like in my head, if I was out there doing that, it would push pretty hard towards these are funerary rites, or this is like some kind of burial ritual.
Right, yeah. And kidding aside, yes, people end up dying in all sorts of strange places and nooks and crannies throughout history and throughout the globe, but this feels purposeful, right? This feels as though it was built to store something. As we were saying, Noel, Kalani finds these strong indicators, and is on the right path, right? The path toward discovery. Except the research got shut down and then banned to the point where if you were a professor or a boffin, a fellow nerd, egghead, or tourist trying to check out these sites, you could meet the wrong end of a sword.
For sure.
Very nasty stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Research was banned until 1994, which is why there are so many theories. In the absence of transparency, speculation only thrives. Maybe we start with the craziest theory. What if there were giants? There's actually a little bit of sandstone to this, as Noel would say.
Yes, the idea that giant humanoids existed for some period in that region and potentially learned how to quarry and carve stone. And then also, for some reason, didn't leave any material trace that they existed other than a bunch of carvings on a plateau.
Well, yeah. It's weird. Guys, do you get images of Skyrim at all and the giants with the mammoths?
Dude.
Like walking
Go after
around.
them. They always smash me, but they're fun to. They are gentle, but sometimes you just want to f around and find out with those.
You're
guys.
going to turn into a stealth archer. That's what Skyrim does.
That's every time, every time. But I guess I have images of that in my mind where you can imagine early versions of us imagining the creatures like us that are walking around, that are close to the size of a mammoth that would, raise mammoths and use mammoths for whatever purposes, including getting their milk, like in Skyrim. But whatever, you can just, I think you can imagine that.
Yeah, for sure. It's also, here's the sandstone part about it. Here's where the argument sounds less crazy. It's the old Bigfoot question we're raising, right? These huge things that were somewhat like, yet entirely distinct from humans. They existed, they proliferated, they vanished, they left nothing behind except for the fact that they're super into jars. There is a fascinating folkloric note because Southeastern Asia was, during this era of time, home to the world's largest known primate. It has a very dumb and I would say somewhat offensive name, its full name, but its real just call it Gigantopithecus.
Yeah. Wait, it has more than that?
Gigantopithecus blackie.
Oh.
Like the Christopher Walken King Louie in the live-action Jungle Book.
Yes, just so.
He even writes it into the song.
Yes, it is. That is a Gigantopithecus, and well done. And this thing only became extinct in the late Middle Pleistocene. No one's sure why it went extinct. Just like other megafauna of the day, it was a big, probably not super duper fast herbivore, but this guy's a real chonker. 10 feet tall, weighing over 1,200 pounds. Shout out again to the U.S. Hashtag never the metric system. And so we know it's quite possible that human beings, Homo sapiens, in this part of the world ran into this big, not quite human thing out there in the forest. So they would have to have legends about it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. This, if you look at size comparisons of like theoretically what Gigantopithecus could look like from what we do know, it does appear to be Bigfoot-like, somewhere between Bigfoot and King Kong, right? I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. It's also that the way it's depicted in the live-action Jungle Book in the King Louie character, it looks a lot more like an orangutan.
Yeah.
And the way it's depicted in that movie would have been quite significantly larger than the real thing as well, right?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So. Yeah.
It's depicted often in some of these what would you call these scientific illustrations where it's like theoretically this is what it will look like. For me, it looks like a cross between an orangutan and a gorilla, like the way it would ambulate.
Yes,
there you go.
Yes. It's got the big cheeks too on the front. I mean.
But it is not kaiju size.
No. Definitely a chonky boy. But so we know that humans may have interacted with this megafauna in this area at this time. It may have informed folklore, but from everything we know about Gigantopithecus, which is honestly not a lot, this primate did not have the gumption to use tools. There's no record of it doing those classic human moves, right? So we could say that the humans at some point encountered something, maybe even a Gigantopithecus. Honestly, if we know humans, which we do, the odds are that they are the reason the Gigantopithecus went extinct.
Yeah, and you likely wouldn't have much time for fossils to be created. It just depends on if you theoretically did have interaction between, let's say, a large group of Gigantopithecus that lived in that area. Then humans come in, humans figure out how to basically kill all of them.
And eat them.
And potentially eat them. There really wouldn't be anything left. Those bones would go away over that span of time.
Yeah, that's a scary point. I mean, check out the story of those poor hobbits in Indonesia. The other version of this also happened.
Yeah.
I think they ate the hobbits, man.
Yeah, it sure seems like it.
That's Homo florensis, right?
So, yeah, I never know how to pronounce it.
So anyway, yes, hobbits are real. We're just going to throw that one out for you. Check out our earlier episode. We mentioned this just a few minutes ago. Based on the admittedly scant investigations so far, the jars do appear to be some form of grave. They do appear to be funereal. They appear to be ritualistic cemeteries. And we know that the humans have always deified, worshipped, and feared the dead, right? Because death is the one certitude, other than being alive, that everybody has to go to. Go through. It's quite universal. So maybe people in the area were just following the same rules as other cultures, making sophisticated monuments for their loved ones when those folks passed away.
Yeah, potentially, for sure. I found a Fox News article, guys, that was from 2019 that was discussing the number of young persons, like remains of young persons that were found in these jars. And it was something like over 50% of the humans that were found, or the remains that were found in these jars, were, I think, 15 years old or younger. And a significant proportion of those were children that either died at birth or during birth or, before they were born, or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It almost seems like a way to remember at least young people, but maybe not all young people.
Right. Yeah. And then also we have to realize our sample size is pretty small because it's based on just the remains that were found. Mm-hmm. So as a counterfactual, it's completely possible that let's say these were graves, let's say there were grave robbers, and they just had at least enough of a moral compass, not to disgrace the remains of children.
I didn't even think about that.
It's possible. I don't know if it's true.
Yeah. It's just to give you the actual quote here, guys, instead of off the top of my head, according to this Fox News article, researchers found that over 60% of the population at Site 1, that specific Site 1 that we mentioned earlier, was less than 15 years of age. And almost half of those died at the fetal stage or in early infancy.
Okay. Yeah. And there does seem to be some sand to that. We also know it's possible these were not permanent graves. It might be a case where a body was placed within a jar and it was decomposed or laying in state before it was moved to a secondary location. Because our next question is inevitably going to be, why do not all of the jars have human remains?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's a question. I
keep different kinds of stuff in jars. The jar's not just for one type of thing.
I love a good jar. Yeah.
Did you guys see that there's this theory that potentially the jars were used for almost, it's not the same thing. Some of the rites that have been around for a long time where humans either attempt to preserve the squishy bits of a body after it's died, or to remove the squishy bits so that all you have is like bones.
Right. Leading up to, usually in a process leading up to a final phase of internment or incineration.
Yeah.
We know that, I'm glad you mentioned this, because we know that in the royal tradition of Thailand's ruling family, historically your body is cremated, but only many months after your death. And your body will be moved from one urn to the next until the final day of incineration. And the belief is that this reflects the gradual transition from the earthly world to the world of the spirits or the heavens. So totally possible. Also, I love that point. Yeah, people keep all kinds of stuff in jars.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I've got my dog that passed recently in a thing like that, just because I want to have it around, and I can imagine that if you've got loved ones that passed, you put them in one of those things until they're ready for whatever the rites are,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe waiting is part of the ritual. It's tough because we do have to remember these are real people, no matter how long ago, and they did die. It's possible too that this became a social flex, that this became an impressive thing to do.
Well, I mean, surely these ornate things were not just for everybody, right? I mean, it would seem it's almost like tantamount to, the pharaohs and having very, very ornate sarcophagi or whatever, and the pyramids and all of that. It would certainly seem that if there were versions of these that were for the plebs or whatever, that they would be significantly less ornate. I mean, when my mother passed away, to get anything beyond just the most basic of urns is very expensive, even today.
But there's so many of them. I don't know. At so many places. I don't know.
I think it's more a function of this is the normalized way to commemorate the dead or to process that passage. But there's also, I love that we're pointing out the common misconception about ancient Egypt. Not everybody got a pyramid.
Oh.
It was a very 1%er thing for those guys.
Yeah.
And it was, dare I say, a pyramid scheme.
Oh,
wow. All right.
A lot of work for one individual.
Yes. Yeah.
Guys, have we done a full episode about pyramids and the theories of energy usage and battery storage and all the stuff like that?
I don't know. We've certainly come up in other conversations, but I'd have to look, right?
Ley lines, couple videos. Yeah.
Specifically with water and using, I've been going down some YouTube rabbit holes about pyramids, and I want to talk about it with you guys at some point.
Orgone energy.
Yes. I love it. I will also, without hesitation and without apology, reuse that pyramid scheme joke because I really like it.
Yes. I like it too.
Yeah. So it is possible then that if this were a normalized social thing, people might begin planning for their demise, right? The same way the same way people build a Taj Mahal or they plan a graveyard or grave plot before their time. We know this would have happened generation after generation, but we will probably not have the answers. We hope we do, but this is why we need your help. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is one of the most important in the area, and it got the ever-loving Christ bombed out of it over and over again. Imagine if all the bombs in World War II were just dropped on Stonehenge.
That's insane. I mean, and that's accurate, Ben, because this is a very small, geographically small part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what we wanted to open with and to close with. The Plain of Jars fell victim to bombing. Even today, there are areas of the plain that are full stop unsafe. Even for the rats that are trained to figure out the bombs. You know what I mean? Sometimes the rats just turn around and say I'm not paid enough for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No amount of cheddar is worth this.
Well,
Cheddar. Of course it's cheddar. Yeah.
well, and I don't know if I'm trying to get this out, guys. Sometimes the numbers get skewed in a way that makes me feel like, oh, that's not that big a deal. But you read something like there were 63 accidents in 2021 where there was unexploded ordnance that went off and maimed or killed people, right?
2021.
Yeah.
And reported.
Exactly. So like immediately when you see that number, you're like, oh, that's not that many. Maybe that's not that big of a deal. Oh, it's a huge freaking deal.
It definitely is. Because as we mentioned previously, from 1964 to 1973, as part of what is conventionally called the Cold War or the Secret War, the U.S. military dropped more than 2 million tons worth of bombs over this country in secret, with the idea that doing so would prevent the spread of communist forces. Again, very Cold War, very domino theory of hegemony. The CIA stepped in to radicalize and train anti-communist forces pulled from local tribes like Hmong tribes. And the whole thing was, let's disrupt supply chains to communist Vietnamese forces. Before you think we're getting too political, folks, please remember, Dwight Eisenhower is the guy who greenlit this, the CIA activity and the whole shebang. And then the next several presidents, regardless of their political ideology, were fully on board with doing this.
Yep.
They just made it more extreme. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, they may have had public performance differences in their speeches, but when they got to the closed door of the Oval Office, they all co-signed on continuing these programs.
Yep. It's messed up to look at a map too. If you go back and watch some documentaries about the Vietnam War, you can see Da Nang, which is one of the main places that troops were deployed from. You can, if you just look at the map, you can see how they would send aerial attacks to the north towards northern Vietnam, where they were going to drop those bombs, and they would just fly right over Laos, which is basically a strip next to the strip that is Vietnam, and then hang a right as they're going over where this plane is, the plane of jars. And it's just where they were dropping bombs. And it's horrifying.
It's horrifying. And it's true. It's also it's a heartbreaking thing for humanity overall. Because of this activity, humanity has prevented itself from solving some ancient mysteries, from doing real research that tells humans where they come from. That's why most of the vast area containing the jars today is off limits to the public. You can visit like 7 sites, I think. Site 1 is probably the most fascinating because it has a specific and unique type of jar, a limestone jar at Site 1. Who knows how old it is? It has a bas-relief carving of something that looks like a hybrid between a human being and a frog. Why?
Okay.
Dude.
No one knows.
Dude.
It's just one of those ancient things that we could have figured out if we could just stop bombing each other.
Yep. Look up the Victory Cup and Plane of Jars. There's all kinds of amazing individual jars like that. And just the whole thing itself. It's been a fascinating episode, guys.
Absolutely.
We hope so. We also hope you can solve it. Tell us what's going on. If you happen to be on the ground, if you are an ancient giant or eldritch being who has a good explanation for why you would get in a situation where you have to build these gigantic stone cauldrons, we want to hear from you. We hope you find this investigation fascinating as well, maybe so much so that you give us a couple stars on your podcast rating program of choice. Or
how about 5?
5, if you're choosing stars, please choose 5. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist all over the internet, your internet platform of choice, including X, FKA, Twitter, as well as Facebook, where we have our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, and on YouTube, where we have video content galore for you to enjoy. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We have a phone number. Put this in your phone right now as a contact. Call it whatever you want. Maybe the dark. Ooh, that would be a good one. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. If you do choose to call it, you will hear a familiar voice and then a beep. After that point, you've got 3 minutes to leave a voicemail message. Just make sure you give yourself a cool nickname and let us know in the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that breed every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Find us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.